the shift itself doesn't put you into your new reality, but integration does. This is what I want to talk today about, because for the last year, I've spent healing my deepest core wounds. I'm talking everything from past lives to childhood to recent history of my life. And there are a lot of different things that I did during that healing process. From the shift itself that started either through EMDR therapy, through my own integrative therapy and spiritual practices, meditation, yoga, somatic work, a lot of somatic work, even yoni healing, right? But throughout all of that, it came to a point where I healed enough time and time again, where integration processes were needed. Because if we're not integrating the shifts that happened, if we're not integrating the process of working through all of that, then we don't actually embody, right? Like that's like the last step. It's shift, process, integrate, embody. And integration is the key to making that new reality. And I'm not talking about like rainbows and butterflies reality. I'm talking about from a before and after the shift, right? And so there are 4 specific ways that I integrated that healing that I want to share with you. And then I also want to share some other tips and tidbits on integration that could maybe help you on your journey. So the first way that I really allowed myself to integrate the healing that was happening, now keep in mind, I'm talking like root chakra, developmental, years 0 to 7 of my life kind of wounding. Like I mentioned, even past life wounding and patterns and habits that I needed to kind of not even just repattern, but just release. They were already worked through on so many different levels. And I could go down so many different wormholes around past life healing in itself. But even the traumas that I experienced like 3-4 years ago that I wasn't even really letting myself process up until this past year. And there are even things that happened when I was in college that I completely repressed and did not even remember and access until November of last year. So this is what I've really been working on, like that level. And I know that I'm not alone, because I have talked with so many clients. I've talked with so many other women and just people in general who are saying that this past year just threw them into a spiral of deep healing. And a lot of us are kind of not even necessarily coming out on the other side of it, but we're just on the other side and we're looking around and we're like, okay, but now what? And so that's the integration. And post-integration is just, okay, this is a new phase, a new reality, a new chapter, a new book entirely, whatever you want to call it, however it's coming up for you in life. And that's where you kind of just keep going on and going forward, right? That integration, God, it's the bridge. It is the bridge from before and after, from the shift to embodiment. And it's not just with our deepest core wounds, right? It's not with just our deepest gut-wrenching healing moments. It's also with allowing ourselves to feel pleasure, allowing ourselves to receive all of the amazing things that we want in life. There's a quote that runs around Instagram all the time, and I love it because it reflects it so perfectly. It says, we don't heal to no longer feel pain. We heal so that we can feel pleasure. And so the integration is the bridge. I'll stop rambling about it. Let's get right into it. So the first way that I integrate my own personal healing, these are a little bit different, not your usual ways. And that's why I want to share them first. And then I'll get into just more common ways, more ways that you can just apply to yourself and however things are coming up for you. So the first one is kind of pendulating between emotional processing and pleasure. The biggest part of integration for me is emotional, right? We have these 5 realities or these 5 branches of life. Technically 6, because there's one that's like a whole other thing. But we have the physical, the mental or the intellectual, the emotional, the energetic, the spiritual. And for me, I categorize the 6 as sexuality, because our sexuality is our life force energy. And yes, it sounds like it's just in the energy portion, but it's not, because it does. It combines the emotions, it combines body, it combines spirituality, it combines energy, everything together, right? But for me, the biggest part of integration is emotional. Could be because of all the water placements in my chart. Could just be because that's just how I am wired. Like even with human design, right? But the emotions, I mean, I've said it for years and it's a common saying and it's cliche to say that emotions are just energy in motion and it ripples through everything. Emotion is the water element, and that ripple effect is the perfect analogy for it. So for me, allowing all of the feelings to be there and to be felt until they offered everything that they could was the key. But I also had to reorient myself into the present time and time again with pleasure. I'm not talking about just sex, even though that definitely counts as pleasure, right? But I'm even talking about a walk outside, a cup of coffee that I just started reincorporating into my life about a couple months ago. You know, just allowing myself to look at the blue sky or to go outside and feel the rain. You know, just these little things, even like these moments of where I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm feeling so emotionally overwhelmed. I don't know how I can get all of this done today. And just giving myself as much time as I need. Maybe it's not as much as I would want sometimes. Maybe it's just 10 minutes or maybe it's an hour or two. Whenever I can, quote unquote, afford that day. And I just let myself veg, and I just let myself dive into those feelings. If that is going to bring me pleasure, because it's not just working on the emotional processing, right? It's also incorporating that pleasure. Or just allowing myself to just sip my water while looking out the window, or playing a song and dancing. It does not matter, but just pendulating between emotional processing and going through the gunk and feeling the shadow, and then also, going on to and pendulating to the opposite end of the spectrum of life. It helped me to process and it helped me to integrate deeper, because I was allowing myself to experience the full spectrum, to go back and forth as much as I needed to. The second thing was the ancestral healing and boundaries. This is a big one because, like so many women today, and especially I feel like younger women are realizing that more women than we would like to admit that have come before us in our bloodlines have struggled with prioritizing their own well-being and thus healthy boundaries. And y'all, it wasn't easy, and it's still not a walk in the park for me all the time yet. But the more I worked with my ancestors, the more support and strength they offered me in speaking up and in meeting my needs and saying yes and saying no and feeling courageous in saying that, which meant I had more time and space to integrate while also repatterning ancestrally. I worked with my great grandmother who passed away when I was 10, and I have been working with her for the past year. And she was the most soft-spoken woman. She was known for crying at everything. She was really, really sweet, right? But also, there were times, and I've heard stories from her daughter, my grandmother, and my mother, where she didn't stand up for herself necessarily in a lot of different ways. And, that's fine. Like, she had her path, and we've talked about this before, there's nothing that she would want to do differently if she could have that lifetime over again. But she's been helping me, and even her mother and her grandmother have been coming in for me for oh my gosh, like 3 years now. And just explaining, you're doing things that we couldn't, and we're here for you in that. We understand how hard it is. We understand that it's so hard that it's just easier to not have those boundaries, or to stand up for yourself, or to do what you feel called rather than what other people expect of you. And when we're integrating, when we are going from who we were, how we were, to how we are starting to feel and how we are being, quote unquote, before and after shifts, right? That's so required. It's required to say, yeah, maybe this is going to be showing up differently now for me. Maybe my presence in your life is going to look a little differently, or feel or sound a little differently. And you have to prioritize yourself. Or at least that was, my experience, because these are just my tips. I'll share some other universal ones later. But the third one is inner child and womb work simultaneously. The more all the younger versions of me spoke up, the more I had to technically do soul retrieval work. I know a lot of people call it parts work, in the counseling field, but just going back and, getting the little girl that was scared in the room after something traumatizing happened, or going, using that into any different scenario, going back and literally holding a previous version of me and working through and processing everything that was there, and then bringing them into the round table in my heart, so that they had a seat, so that they had a voice, so that they weren't alone, so they weren't really, so fragmented, right? The more that I did that, and especially the younger versions of me, right? The inner child, the inner teenager, the inner 20-something-year-old, the more I learned I needed to respond from my inner mother. So many of us have had mothers who weren't necessarily the ones that we think that we needed. They couldn't show up for us in certain ways. They didn't have the bandwidth. They didn't have the abilities. They didn't have the knowledge, whatever it may be. But as we do inner child work, as we integrate all of these healing shifts, we kind of step more into an inner parent role. And it's whatever we need in that moment. For me, it's been a lot of inner mother stuff. So womb work kept me in the awareness that I have grown so many years beyond the trauma, and that I have the ability to create my life from here forward. Because we have this womb chakra, all of us, or this womb energy center, if you're not into chakras, and it's separate from our sacral. We often think that sacral is the uterus, or is the energetic womb, because a lot of us have a physical womb. Everybody has an energetic womb too. That's actually where we're creating life from a lot of the times. And so when we are working with that energy within us, within that energy center, and if we're working with our physical womb together, like, damn, is it potent? Is it powerful? So allowing myself to really pendulate between those two things really helped as well. And then the last one for me was holding. And this is like the secret sauce for me. Just holding the polarity of all of this and beyond. Not forcing my process to look or feel or be differently. Not shying away from the shadows. Not closing my eyes when it got too bright. Just holding the present moment, however it was, every single bit of what it entails, and holding my way through it, holding my heart, holding my self-love, holding my allowance, just holding myself. And while I know that those 4 things might not be easy or doable or relatable for everybody here, there are 3 ways that you can integrate your spiritual and your holistic healing shifts. The first one is to take a break from other spiritual and healing work. It's really, really easy to want to keep pushing and growing. Maybe it's my Virgo placements, especially like my Virgo Venus and Mars. I'm just like, yeah, let's keep going, let's keep going, let's keep going. Like that part of me really wants to just push, and like my Sagittarius rising wants to expand my boundaries. And sometimes that can lead to, I don't want to say delays necessarily, but even more blockages. Because when I'm acting from that place, for me personally, apply this however it looks like for yourself. But if you're pushing and you're forcing and you're like, okay, well, this happened, like, let's just keep growing, right? Then you're just going to keep skipping from shift to shift to shift to shift. Maybe some processing in between there, right? But taking a break is actually what allows the embodiment of that to be accelerated. And so try not to force yourself into a practice if it would truly and deeply feel better to just not. Like, don't pull cards that day. Don't meditate that day. Don't whatever, practice feels like. And this is like going to have to come from a true place of inner discernment and honesty with yourself. Is it going to feel like you're just doing one more thing? Or is it actually going to help you process? Is it going to help you integrate? If it's going to help you just do one more thing and like check another box or anything like that, maybe ask yourself if that's really like the best thing that you feel like is right for you. The second one is to rest as much as possible and hydrate. Fatigue is so common after experiencing a big shift, especially after the processing. Fatigue can look even like depression sometimes for us. Our bodies and our minds are right there experiencing everything with us, and they need to process what just happened. And I'm talking about even process the processing. And so just allowing that kind of moment to be like, for one quick second, if you're able to, like if you're not driving, operating heavy machinery, just try taking 5 breaths with 2 quick inhales and a longer exhale, right? Let's do it all together right now. And now just allow yourself to see, sit, feel what kind of sensations are coming up here. Do you feel a little bit of lightheadedness? Do you feel like your heart rate has increased? Do you feel like a little buzz even maybe? And so the process is that breathing, you taking a moment to stop and seeing what the sensations are there. That's the integration process, right? Seeing what has come up afterwards. And it requires that moment of not necessarily stillness, but not overactivity at least, to actually see what is coming up, to really process what just happened. And so a lot of times getting extra sleep, drinking extra spring water, I will always, always push spring water over purified or tap or just regular drinking water, because you're going to get minerals. It's coming straight from the earth. There's no birth control or any other medications that haven't been fully filtered out of it. And just rest in ways that bring you enjoyment. I don't care if that's watching Netflix for 7 hours a day on the weekends or on your day off, or whether it's sleeping until like 1 p.m, if that's something that you're able to do. Just allowing yourself to rest whatever ways you really enjoy it. The third thing is to comfort any kind of symptoms that come up. And this is a big one. A lot of times people can call them ascension symptoms, and you can definitely look at it if you're just seeing it from an energetic and a spiritual perspective. But if you're looking at it from a holistic perspective, right, we're going in with all 6 of those branches of life, then they're just kind of like healing and shift symptoms. A lot of times, like headaches, belly aches, sore random spots on the body, or food cravings, randomly wanting to cry, all of these things and more might happen as your system processes the shift and processes the integration, or I'm sorry, processes the process, which is the integration. And so just help yourself any way you feel called as you work through it. And that includes, taking some Tylenol or some Aleve if you need it, drinking some ginger tea, getting a massage, taking Epsom salt baths, allowing yourself to eat the salt or the sugar. Obviously don't make yourself sick, right? But give your body whatever it's craving, in moderation. Your limits. Allowing yourself to cry if you need it, going and checking in with your doctor if that's something that you really feel called to do. We have so many resources available to us, and not everybody can go to the doctor, right? But just doing whatever you can in your capacity to support your body and your mind through the integration. So those were the 4 big things. But there is one other thing that I don't think is hardly ever talked about enough, let alone suggested, and that is dream work. This is my weird bonus tip. Dream work happens whether you're cognizant or aware of it or not. We do so much. Even if you look at it from a psychological perspective, right? When we dream, we're working with our subconscious mind, or so they say. But a lot of us are also working on soul levels. I would say all of us are working on soul levels while we sleep. And so if you do dream, and you don't necessarily have to wake up and remember your dreams, but if you feel like you kind of have a more active sleep, I would say, before you go to bed, and even if you don't, just give it a try. But before you go to bed, just ask your higher self and say a quick intention, a quick prayer of like, higher self, help me integrate this while I sleep. And you might have wild dreams, even if you don't usually have dreams. You might wake up and, have lyrics playing in your head that like seem just oddly relevant to what you're experiencing. You might have emotions or memories come up that you kind of just want to jot down when you wake up. And just doing dream work can help so much. But when you ask your higher self to help you process and help you integrate everything while you sleep, this is something that I learned from my integrative therapy and from my shamanic teacher. Doing that, it takes so much of the load off of doing it consciously while you're awake. And just know that the things that are happening, those are things that are going to benefit you in that way. There are things that, we do have to deal with and we do have to work with while we are awake and while we are fully cognizant and fully aware of what's happening. But there are a lot of things that can just get processed while we are sleeping and just get integrated while we are sleeping. So that's my extra little tip. And so I just want to wrap up this episode by saying you don't have to do spiritual practices every day. Just prioritize integration after you experience a big shift, after you've done a lot of processing. Letting yourself do and be human will help ground down all of those beautifully profound spiritual moments into your daily life. All of those big healing moments into your daily life, where it should be, so that it feels real for you and not just kept in the clouds of la la woo woo land, even though that's a beautiful place to be, right? That light bulb moment starts the shift and the integration solidifies it. You're also going to prevent burnout. Oh my God. Spiritual burnout and emotional healing and physical healing, all of it, we can really burn ourselves out. It gets real. And so from experience, I feel like it's helpful to go full force from one end of the spectrum of going like, hell yeah, I'm going to blast through all of these shifts, to the other of like, nope, I'm done. I'm taking a break. I took a break for over a year from most spiritual work. I didn't do card pulls. I barely meditated. I went through my yoga teacher training at that time, and obviously that's just a spiritual experience in general, but I focused even more on my body then rather than the spiritual or the energetic stuff that was coming up. But regardless, we have to go from one end of the spectrum to the other to eventually find our own middle where we value the rest of life and the rest of what life on earth has to offer, right? We're not just going and doing spiritual work 24/7. We're also watching TV or, going out for a drink or going and watching a sports game or, you know what I mean? It's not just spiritual stuff. Like, we're not living just from that one or two branches of life. We're encompassing all of it, seeing as much as life has to offer and connecting, all of it together. And at the same time, by doing that, we're overcoming over productivity and perfection. Take it from me. Don't fall for traps of what spiritual ideals look like. Some of my greatest shifts have come from stuffing my face with popcorn and binging a show on Netflix. Guys, especially Outlander, because it unlocked past life memories and power. And then I napped for hours integrating it all. And really, I created this episode just because I want to just remind you, remember, everything you do is spiritual. I've said this for years. Everything is a spiritual experience simply because you're alive and you're collecting an experience with your soul. And your soul is going to take all of that with it, regardless if it looks spiritual, insta-worthy or not. Like if you're doing dishes or you're driving or you're eating, it's all spiritual. I hope that this episode helped you, and I will see you next time. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the show. Thank you so much for being here and sitting in this circle for our chat today. If you feel called, let me know how this impacted you by leaving a rating or review, and I'll see you next time.